Hi, and welcome back to this Monday edition of Focal Point on AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. Great to have you in the conversation. You are listening to Focal Point on the American Family Radio Talk Network. Great to have you in the conversation. Honored to welcome to our Newsmaker line a frequent guest on Focal Point, Twila Brase. Twila is the president of the Citizens Council for Health Freedom, and is also responsible for the Health Freedom Minute, a one-minute commentary that you often hear frequently, in fact, every day right here on Focal Point. Twila, welcome back to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Thanks so much, Brian. Glad to be here.
Well, it's good to have you with us. And Twila, one of the things we've been concerned about is we've been watching all this business with Obamacare and watching it develop, and I have a couple of other questions that I want to ask you beyond what initially I want to talk with you about. But you and the Citizens Council for Health Freedom, you have been concerned about privacy of patient medical records, and there was an issue that developed in the state of Minnesota, which I think has nationwide implications because other states are going to try to do the same thing. The federal government may try to do the same thing. So tell us about what was going on in Minnesota and what you were able to do about that and where that thing stands as of today.
Well, I think the way to say it sort of briefly is this issue has to do with DNA and genetic information, and the health department here was claiming the DNA of newborns, from the get-go, and then being able to store it, use it, share it, use it for research without any consent or knowledge of the parents. We won a lawsuit on that, and then they went to the legislature, the health department did, and said, well, there are other things that we have been storing, using, and sharing without anybody's consent, and now we need a law to protect us from further lawsuits. So because the Democrats are in control here in Minnesota of every branch, they are going to get that law. But what they tried to do, in addition to that, was to violate the Supreme Court ruling here in Minnesota, which said that the baby DNA and the genetic test results from the newborns had to be destroyed within a certain amount of time. And so, I'm sorry.
Bless you.
Sorry, thank you. And so, just to be clear, what the health department is going to get is a genetic warehousing biobank for everybody's DNA and genetic information that falls within a certain purview, and it can just grow and grow and grow. But the one thing that's exempt from that is the baby's DNA because of the lawsuit. But so what they wanted to do was try to get one more legislative session to perhaps keep it. And so they had language in there that said that they didn't have to throw away the genetic test results for another 7 months until they could get through next year's legislative session. And that was our win. We got legislators in the House, including 2 Democrats that were on the committee and the 1 Republican, to agree that that language should not be allowed in the final bill. And what that does for us is it sets up a precedent of destruction of the child's genetic test results by the health department, which, and parents don't have to worry about these genetic test results because they automatically go from the government to the baby's medical record. So the health department just wanted to use this for their own purposes, for profiling, for research, and now they are going to have to start destroying them in November. And it will be much more difficult for them to come back next year or any other year and say, well, now we need to stop destroying them and keep them for ourselves. This really was a win.
And Twila, if you could comment just for a minute on sort of the longer range implications here of genetic testing and all of that. There's just huge privacy concerns, but also you start getting into other concerns about whether somebody will be insurable. In other words, if they do have some kind of prenatal or even postnatal kind of genetic test that surfaces some kind of anomalies or potential health risks, it could make it difficult for people to get health insurance down the road.
Right. And one of the things that I used with these legislators was the fact that NIH, the National Institutes of Health, recently put out a call for ideas about genomic sequencing at birth. And genomic sequencing means that you look at the whole DNA. You don't test it for just a few conditions, which is what newborn screening is today, a few genetic conditions. No, you would look at the entire DNA, and you would come up with a record of all the weaknesses, all the potentialities. Everything that's in the DNA would be put down in black and white on the child's record. And I showed that to one of the legislators and said, this is coming. You do not want the health department to keep the genetic test results of children, because then eventually they won't even need the DNA. They will have it all in black and white in code. And so I think when we look into the future, that is where newborn genetic testing is going. It is to full genomic sequencing. And this is done only by health departments in every state. So parents need to be very aware of this, and I encourage them to go for private testing instead of the government testing that happens at the hospital, and to protect their children.
Yeah, and we've seen that in that case, fairly highly publicized a week or two ago, where parents went in with a young infant, and they simply wanted a second opinion. They were going to take the child from the hospital to another medical professional, another doctor, just simply to get a second opinion. The hospital wouldn't let them go, sent the police. The police came and temporarily at least took their child into custody. Now, Twila, let's talk for a minute about what we may have to be concerned about along this privacy angle and all of that with the role that the IRS is going to play in implementing Obamacare.
Yes, well, the IRS is kind of in hot water right now with the fact that they were targeting conservative groups. And I look at the fact that the president wants 2,000 more IRS workers to enforce Obamacare. And so then when you talk about enforcement, the only way that you can enforce something is you have to have knowledge. And the Health Insurance Exchange is going to have a database, and they call it the National Health Insurance Exchange Program. And it is a federal database for everyone who gets their coverage through an exchange, no matter if you're in Wyoming or Washington or Florida or wherever you are. This is a federal system. You will submit your data to the federal government, and they are going to keep it in this federal system of records. And this will have information all the way from your citizenship to part of your health status to where you live and how many people are in your family, your income, your wages, where you work, does your employer offer health insurance. All of this will be allowed to come together in this federal system of records as a huge profile on every family that goes into the exchange. That's one of the reasons we encourage people not to go into the exchange. Even though there's a federal subsidy in there, you are putting yourself into a federal system, and you are increasing and encouraging the full implementation of Obamacare. That's what the exchanges are meant to do. But the system, the data system that's in there, is the largest data system on anybody in this country, and it's never been done before in this way, setting up a whole IT system across the entire United States to gather all this information, put it in this federal system. So, of course, we encourage people not to be part of the system. And if they're not part of the system, it gets a little bit more difficult for the IRS to implement Obamacare, but I have no doubt that they will continue to try.
Well, you know, and Twila, I'm looking here at a story, Americans for Tax Reform, talking about the fact that beginning next January, I mean, most Americans have no idea that this train is bearing down on them. It's on the track and about ready to run them over. Every American who files a tax return is going to have to file an additional IRS tax form with all of that kind of identifying health information that you talk about, personal identifying health information. Every American who files a tax return is going to have to fill that out and submit it to the IRS. So these health insurance agencies may be the ones that are sending the tax form out to you to fill out and include with your 1040, but that turns these health insurance companies virtually into agents for the IRS.
Right. They are part of the policing system. The exchange is part of the policing system. The employers are part of the policing system. The only ones that they'll have a harder time getting hold of are those that don't have the tax forms and those who do not have an employer, or those who are working, you know, without any sort of like cash under the table, right? So yes, there's an entire paperwork system here where you have to take the form that your insurer sends you and you have to attach that to your IRS return. The employers have to send in the names and tax ID numbers and coverage of every employee that they cover and even those that they don't. So, it's an incredible network of data that is being created here, all under the guise of getting insurance for everyone.
We've got about a minute and a half, Twila. I wanted to shift gears just slightly and talk about what Kathleen Sebelius out there doing. I just had a hard time even believing what I was reading about what she is doing right now to raise funds for implementing Obamacare.
Yes. They're in trouble because they cannot get the U.S. House to provide money for them. And it's so important to stop the health insurance exchanges because they are the centerpiece of Obamacare. They are the implementation center. And so they are now beating the bushes, trying to get money to have advertising and marketing campaigns to showcase the exchange and bring people in. But it's really important for everybody who listens to your program to tell people why they don't want to be in the exchange, why they should ignore all the ads. And it's important for organizations and businesses not to give them any money to help in the process. So, starving Obamacare of funds is the perfect way to defeat it.
It struck me, Twila, just listen. She's out there raising money from churches.
Right.
She's asking churches for donations to the government or to organizations that are going to help implement Obamacare and get the word out about Obamacare. So it seems like this whole separation of church and state thing, separation they want to impose on us, but when it comes to their pet agendas, what separation of church and state?
Right, and they want them to give them money to Enroll America. And Enroll America is run and started by 2 Obama staffers whose intent is to put 100 workers or 100 workstations around the country and then to hire other people to get all these people enrolled in Obamacare.
Our guest has been Twila Brase, president of the Citizens Council for Health Freedom. She is responsible for the Health Freedom Minute that you hear right here every day, 60-second commentary here on Focal Point. Twila, I appreciate the work that you're doing there with the Citizens Council for Health Freedom. Tell our listeners how they can get more information about what you're doing.
Yes, they can come to www.cchfreedom.org, and they can just click at the top of the page, and they can get our e-news, which comes out every Wednesday.
cchfreedom.org. Our guest, Twila Brase. Thank you, Twila, again, for being with us.
Thank you.
That's Twila Brase from Citizens Council for Health Freedom. We'll take your phone calls when we come back. 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840 on the IRS and Obamacare. Give us a call.